Hello, everybody. I'm Rashad Salamat. This is the NewsHour Live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. America turns 250. President Trump promises the biggest Independence Day spectacle in U.S. history.
Over the past 250 years, America has built the world's most powerful military and a diplomatic sway that few can rival. We'll look at the complicated legacy that comes with being a superpower. That's later on This is America with me, Alex Marquardt.
Also ahead on this NewsHour, from rescue to recovery. Search operations take a grim turn 10 days after Venezuela's devastating earthquakes. Huge crowds gather in Tehran to mourn the late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Firefighters battle wildfires across southern Europe after an intense heat wave. Celebrations have been taking place across the U.S. to mark 250 years of independence. President Trump kicked off the celebrations on the eve of July the 4th from historic Mount Rushmore. He's also expected to take part in celebrations later in Washington, D.C. There was an aerial display in the sky above New York City carried out by the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps squadron known as the Blue Angels. And vessels from around the world taking part in what organizers say is the largest ever flotilla of tall ships. At least 30 countries are joining the parade down the Hudson River. Millions expected to gather on Washington's National Mall for the D.C. event, which will culminate in a speech by President Trump and what's being described, or should I say billed, as a spectacular fireworks display. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reports.
America's 250th Independence Day celebrations underway on the National Mall. Marching bands setting the patriotic tone. 250 years ago, Americans battled the British for their independence. On Saturday, they battled the heat. Due to record-breaking temperatures, the National Independence Day Parade in Washington was canceled, mirroring similar cancellations in Philadelphia.
I can't believe that we don't have this great parade that 1 million people are supposed to be present here.
It's just the land of opportunity, and it's worth every minute of this heat.
Still, millions of Americans celebrated their country's independence. Tall ships paraded along the Hudson River in New York. And Native Americans marking Independence Day with mixed emotion. Ceremonies across the nation celebrating Native resistance to colonialism and cultural pride. As part of the 250th anniversary celebrations, an unprecedented 7 hours of military aircraft performing flypasts, including the U.S. Navy's famed Blue Angels and even an F-35 stealth fighter. The 4th of July festivities aren't just centered here in Washington, D.C. In fact, there are people celebrating with cookouts and barbecues, small town parades, and even fireworks in communities all across the United States. The British Embassy in Washington also getting in on the fun, issuing a congratulatory post marking the breakup of British rule from American colonies, calling the U.S. the greatest ex we've ever had. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance speaking at an anniversary event in New York City, acknowledging America's political divisions and calling for unity.
Reject the view of your nation that sees only its sins, but not its grace and its greatness. Everything that we have done as a country, we have done together.
Vance's speech comes ahead of President Trump's address on the National Mall, culminated by a fireworks display over the nation's capital. But thunder showers are expected, raising questions about whether the display will be allowed to go ahead. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Now, Phil DeVellis at the 250 Independence Day celebrations at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Phil, certainly a military tinge to those celebrations. What are they looking like?
Well, it's a real carnival atmosphere, literally. I mean, you've got the carnival over there, and you don't have to look very far to see the Star-Spangled Banner, if I can get my words out, on a T-shirt or on a hat. And let's just explain why this is such an important, because here it's not just a celebration of America's 250th birthday, but it's also a recognition of the role that the military has had to play in that 250 years. Obviously, we know that it is such an iconic part of the American identity. So here's what's happening here. At the moment, we've got a stage being set up. There's going to be music playing late into the night. There's some line dancing over there, which you might be able to see. And if we come all the way around here, we can just see in the distance over there are some cannons being lined up. The plan is for later those cannons to fire 50 rounds, one for each of the United States. And it really just emphasizes the importance of the military here, because this is, Fort Campbell is really central to that identity. This is where you have a number of elite units located, including the Night Stalkers, who are those elite low-altitude helicopter pilots who flew into Venezuela at the start of the year to help extract Nicolas Maduro and bring him back to the United States. Other divisions here, we've got the 5th Special Forces Group, who are among the first on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11, and the 101 Airborne Division, and that is the elite group that was involved in the landings of the parachutes into Normandy on D-Day. And we have one of those members of that division, First Lieutenant Dalton Worley. Just explain to us about the feeling today, Lieutenant, on a symbolic day today, if you're in the military particularly.
It's a very honorable time to be in the military. It's getting the honor to be in this uniform when we're celebrating 250 years of freedom, when all those soldiers, Navy, Air Force, all the different military members before us were able to keep us free today, and we get to look forward to keeping us free in the future.
And there's a real appreciation that, as well as that, not just here, but outside. You know, you see people in the United States, you go to an airport, they often will come up and say, thank you for your service. Like, there's a real strong identity to the military.
Yes, it means a lot to us, especially when civilians come up and tell us thank you for our service. But really, we want to thank them for their support. Without their support, we can't do what we need to do, have that motivation to defend our nation and protect their freedoms.
If I could ask you to sum up in just a sentence what it means to be an American on any day, but especially today, not just a big day, but a 250th big day.
On a day like today, I think the biggest thing to embrace that freedom that we've been able to fight for the last 250 years is to go out and spend that time with your family, your loved ones, your friends. Have that freedom to make those choices that best fit your lifestyle with the rights that we fought for in the Bill of Rights, you know.
Lieutenant, thanks very much for that. Well, we're expecting around 35,000 people to be here towards the end of the day. It is a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It is really, really hot. And of course, this is all culminating when the darkness starts to fall and we see those fireworks. So we're expecting many more people to arrive. You can see that at the moment there are just some who are setting up their positions to get a good view of the stage. And it just goes to show just how popular and how loved the military is, particularly in this area, because around about 300,000 people locally, either in the military or they have family in the military or they have a business that is somehow tied to the military. So it is a very strong part of local identity here, as well as national identity for the United States.
Phil, thanks a lot. Phil Lavelle there, joining us live from Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Well, let's have a look now at some of these pictures we had just a short while ago of the Blue Angels. They're performing over, I believe, they were actually. These are the latest pictures. These are not live pictures. Blue Angels there at the moment. Just a short while ago, there, I think, over Washington, D.C., and having really another display as Americans really mark their semi-centenary.
The works that have been going on, that they have been doing here in the Capitol, this is an amazing scene to watch because it tells you about the solidarity of the Venezuelans and also the solidarity from around the world who have come here to Venezuela to help the people after the earthquakes.
Well, crowds have filled the streets of Tehran as Iran begins 6 days of funeral ceremonies for its late supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. He will be buried next Thursday in his hometown of Mashhad. Khamenei and his members of his family were killed in US-Israeli airstrikes in February alongside several senior Iranian officials. It has come as Iran enters a new political era after, indeed, the assassination of its supreme leader. Under its new leader, Tehran appears to be taking a more confrontational stance, from attacks across the region to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But as Ali Hashim reports, behind the defiance, questions linger about where this new leadership wants to take the country.
This is not the Iran that existed before the war. The system survived the assassination of its supreme leader and several high-ranking officials. But it did not emerge unchanged. Mujtaba Khamenei, the son and successor of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has moved to assert himself. Unlike his father, he has chosen direct confrontation outside of Iran and then inside. Tehran attacked neighboring countries and pushed the conflict with the United States and Israel to the edge. Washington did not achieve regime change, but it may have helped produce change inside the system. At the heart of the new posture is what officials in Tehran call deterrence. Iran is signaling that another war against it would be expanded beyond its borders. The control over Hormuz has been the clearest expression of that doctrine. For Tehran, the message was simple. If Iran cannot have stability, others will not buy and sell oil as usual. The confrontation with the US and talks to end the war have become a tit-for-tat contest, each side testing the other without knowing where the red lines lies. The shift is also visible in the wider region. The war in Lebanon to any truce and retaliated after the Israeli attack on Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanon is no longer treated as a security equation. Then there's the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in Iraq. By taking the ceremony through the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, Iran is declaring that its influence across the Shia world would continue. But the new Iran is not without internal tension. There are differences inside the state over whether talks with Washington can still produce results. The decision-making circle has changed. Power appears more concentrated and less cautious. Yet the country still faces sanctions, economic pressure, public fatigue that could reignite mass protests, and aftermath of the war. The post-Khamenei era is taking shape under fire. More assertive, more regional, more willing to escalate, but also more exposed. What is visible now may be less a settled doctrine than a series of acts of defiance by a new leader trying to prove authority. The real test will come when the war ends, the crowds disperse, and Iran has to decide whether this era is built on confrontation alone or something more durable. Ali Hashim, Al Jazeera.
Now, in an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera, the Speaker of Senegal's National Assembly says the country is not facing a political crisis despite its fallout with the President Ousmane Sonko. However, warns that he will not allow the presidency to stand in the way of the will of the people. Earlier this week, lawmakers passed a divisive constitutional reform that limits the president's powers and strengthens oversight by Parliament.
What happened wasn't a problem of trust. You know very well the reasons that led to this split. It has nothing to do with trust. But the most significant thing regarding this separation doesn't lie in trust. We shouldn't dwell on the specifics. In all political regimes, politics is made of unity and separation. The most important thing is why and how we split in the first place. It's because of different perspectives of what constitutes our commitments to the Senegalese people, the program. It has nothing to do with individuals. It has nothing to do with power.
Rebels in Mali have launched coordinated attacks in several towns across the country. The military-led government says the assaults targeted army positions, including a base used by its troops and Russian forces. The Tuareg-led Azawad Liberation Front says it was behind the attack on the city of Anafis. The military says the situation is now under control, as Malik Trainer reports.
A new wave of attacks in northern Mali. Tuareg rebels from the Azawad Liberation Front say they were behind the attacks on the city of Anafis. This video appears to show government soldiers being captured by the separatist group. The army said rebel forces targeted Agulhok, Gao, and Anafis in the north, the central town of Savari, and about 70 kilometers south of the capital Bamako, Keniroba. In Keniroba, a prison reportedly housing Al-Qaeda detainees was attacked. In April, Al-Qaeda-linked armed groups and Tuareg fighters launched a coordinated attack across several cities in Mali. They seized several military bases in the north, taking control of most of the Kidal region, and killed the country's defense minister, Sadio Kamara. This video shows Russian mercenaries withdrawing from Kidal in April. Anafis and Agulhok in the Kidal region are the last remaining positions held by Malian and Russian forces. Russia's Africa Corps mercenaries have been propping up Mali's military since it took power in a coup in 2020. The Russian group is also heavily involved across other countries in the region, including Burkina Faso and Niger. Africa Corps released footage of dead rebel fighters on Saturday. The Malian military says it killed 26 fighters, and the situation is now under control. Mali has been engulfed in violence for more than a decade. For years, Tuareg rebels have been fighting to create an independent state in the north. The country is one of the largest producers of gold in Africa, but nearly half the population lives in poverty, according to the UN. The recent fighting has only made matters worse for people. Saturday's attacks are seen as yet another threat to the military leadership and Russia's influence in West Africa. Maltrena, Al Jazeera.
South Africa has deployed more than 3,000 soldiers nationwide this month to support police during weekly anti-migrant protests. Several African countries are repatriating citizens fleeing violence and intimidation. The rise in anti-foreigner sentiment is also hitting landlords who rent to foreign nationals. But many migrants are staying despite the threats. Harun Mutasa reports from Johannesburg.
Local residents shout, "Open the door, or we will kick it down." Thousands of mainly African foreign nationals have left South Africa after anti-migrant groups set an unofficial deadline for all undocumented foreigners to get out. But some foreigners decided to stay. Police are conducting checks like these nationwide. South Africans inform on landlords who have foreign tenants, and they've been asking tenants to prove they are in the country legally. If they can't, they are arrested.
We let them inside our homes. We must take charge, must take them out of our homes. Not with violence, peacefully so. They must go back home, fix their papers, and they will come back.
Later, the patrols move from homes to shopping centers. Anti-foreigner groups say undocumented immigrants are taking jobs from South Africans. They also blame foreigners for high crime rates. But rights groups say there is little evidence to support those accusations. This area is usually full of vendors selling mainly vegetables. The only person here is this young man, and he is South African. The other vendors were mostly foreigners, and they ran away when they heard that people were going door to door, street to street, checking to see if people working here had valid visas. The government says only police have the authority to ask for documents.
And let no one twist our words. We do not condone unlawful immigration. And we do not pretend that the anxieties of our people are not real. But we will not answer hardship with cruelty.
Now we need to check your documents, your asylum papers, are you good?
Sometimes anti-migrant groups make no distinction between people who are in the country legally and those who are undocumented. And many foreigners know they have to be ready to show their documents if they are asked for them, or potentially face the consequences. Harun Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Johannesburg.
Now to Indonesia, where soldiers have opened fire on 2 villages in western Papua, killing a pregnant woman. It happened in the remote Intan Jaya district on Friday evening. The attack sparked protests among the indigenous West Papuans who are calling for an investigation into the shooting. It's the latest incident to occur in the resource-rich region, which has demanded its independence from Indonesia for decades. Drone attacks are escalating between Ukraine and Russia. A major oil terminal in the Russian city of St. Petersburg was struck overnight by Ukraine. Moscow vowed to respond, saying it downed almost 500 Ukrainian drones. Russia also launched a series of strikes across cities in Ukraine, killing at least 5 people. Perry Wilton has this.
Another residential tower in northeastern Ukraine hit by Russian strikes. These efforts to revive a 5-year-old girl and her mother were unsuccessful. 6 guided aerial bombs struck this busy residential neighborhood in the city of Sumy overnight into Saturday. But it wasn't Russia's only target. Besides Sumy, attacks were also reported in Kherson, Dnipro, Odessa, and Zaporizhia. More than 40 people have been injured, including at this large poultry farm in Kherson. In Russia, a large fire broke out on Saturday morning at a port in the Leningrad region in the northwest, reportedly caused by a Ukrainian drone attack. In St. Petersburg, the governor said the city had come under a, quote, large-scale drone attack. This burning facility is a St. Petersburg oil terminal. Ukraine's focus on Russian energy sources has affected petrol supplies at street level. Here in Moscow, drivers face long queues to fill up their vehicles, and frustration is building.
I've been here for an hour already. I was in the queue for an hour, and I'll probably be here another hour till they open. They're holding it back. They want it to look like there's petrol, but there isn't. If they were selling it at the same pace as before, every petrol station would be empty in an hour.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his forces also struck an important military target in Kronstadt, more than 850 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Strikes like these between Russia and Ukraine are escalating. And in the aftermath, families forced to flee overnight are returning to broken homes. Perry Wilton, Al Jazeera.
Turning now to what's been going on in Germany, where tens of thousands of protesters are rallying across this weekend against the rise of the far-right Alternative for Germany party. Police fought with demonstrators in Erfurt. That's where the AfD is holding its annual conference. Opponents accuse the party of peddling racist policies, and they're concerned by the AfD's surging popularity, particularly in eastern Germany. A new poll there suggests that they are the front runner in an upcoming state election, which is due to be held in Saxony-Anhalt. Thousands of firefighters have been tackling wildfires across parts of Western Europe. The blazes follow heat waves across the continent last month, with unusually high temperatures, certainly for this time of year. Francis Reid has the details.
This highway in Spain now leads towards an inferno. Just one of many wildfires burning across Western Europe. In France, similar conditions in the southwest, driving through thick smoke near Béziers. Where further down the road, the fires are dumped on. Right next to the highway. Traffic at a standstill, but with their own air show, as emergency teams struggle to keep the flames under control. Thousands of firefighters have been battling wildfires across parts of France, Portugal and Spain, including this one in Catalonia, which was burning out of control, consuming hectare after hectare. Thousands have burned across the 3 countries so far, and here thousands of people told to stay indoors to avoid the smoke. Others have been moved on completely. These are among 1,500 tourists from campsites evacuated in places like Canet-en-Roussillon in France, 50 kilometres from the Spanish border. Many of their belongings have been destroyed by the flames.
It feels as if we are in a bad movie. We don't really realise that it has happened. We realise that we have lost everything, that there is nothing left. It's difficult to accept.
In Portugal, near Vuzela in the north, strong winds have worsened the speed and scale of the flames, with 2 seriously injured. Here, they've had help from Spanish firefighters from across the border. So fast is the spread at a speed covering the equivalent of more than 800 football pitches an hour. The World Meteorological Organization has warned that record temperatures across Europe would worsen the risk of wildfires, and this only the start of the season. Francis Reid, Al Jazeera.
Right, let's just check in with the World Cup briefly. We've got Morocco. They've made it into the quarterfinals. They're going to be facing either France or Paraguay. By France. Well, the France and Paraguay showdown has started. They're facing off in Philadelphia. France have been impressive so far with 4 wins out. Right, still to come right here on Al Jazeera. As the United States celebrates its 250th birthday, we explore its role on the world stage and the legacy that comes with being a superpower.
The latest news.
People here are basically balancing 2 things. On the one hand, the importance of peace, and on the other, the importance of the Strait of Hormuz.
With in-depth reports.
The agreement only involves the transfer of 2 relatively small pieces of territory, one of which Israel says it doesn't want in any case.
From the heart of the story.
Behind every crop grown here in Gaza is a Palestinian farmer trying to overcome a growing list of challenges.
The ICC doesn't have a police force. Who is arresting Netanyahu today? Who's arresting Putin?
The fact that you cannot arrest today doesn't mean that you will not be able to arrest tomorrow.
Ken Roth speaks with former ICC President Silvia Fernandez de Gamendi.
What has the ICC accomplished so far?
The court has helped to develop the law on international crimes. Justice is a component of international relations, but it's not the only component.
Reframe on Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera, a reminder of our top stories this hour. Celebrations are underway in the U.S. to mark 250 years of independence. There was an aerial display above New York City, and tall ships from around the world are taking part in a parade down the Hudson River. The death toll from last month's earthquakes in Venezuela is nearing 3,000 people. Families are hoping to recover their loved ones under rubble before authorities demolish damaged buildings. Crowds have filled the streets of Tehran as Iran begins 6 days of funeral ceremonies for its late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He'll be buried next Thursday in his hometown of Mashhad. Khamenei was killed by US-Israeli airstrikes in February alongside several senior Iranian officials. Right, let's get more on America's 250 years since independence, and time to hand you over to our team in Washington.
This is America, coming to you live from the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. I'm Alex Marquardt. 250 years ago, 13 colonies broke away from the British Empire, and they boldly declared their independence. In those 2.5 centuries, the newly independent United States of America has grown into a superpower whose influence has shaped much of the world. Its military was arguably the most powerful in the world, and a diplomatic role rivaled by just a handful of nations. It has brokered some of the world's most consequential peace agreements, led alliances, and anchored global institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF. But the way that the U.S. is flexing its diplomatic muscle has been changing, and its global partners are taking notice. Rory Challens reports.
America's founding fathers were wary of the wider world. Thomas Jefferson counseled honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. For a young and vulnerable nation, avoiding the old world and its interminable conflicts made sense. But once survival had been secured and America's so-called manifest destiny across the continent achieved, this emergent industrial giant couldn't avoid a greater hand in world affairs.
The Japanese launched a surprise attack on the American...
Reluctantly, the United States joins two world wars.
At 9:15, the bomb is dropped.
And emerged from the second a superpower. At the high tide of American internationalism, the US remade the world in its own image. It spent billions rebuilding Europe and Japan and anchored institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. The US was also the first country to recognize the new state of Israel. President Nixon traveled to communist China, an audacious gambit to isolate the Soviet Union.
A framework for peace in the Middle East.
President Carter brokered peace between Israel and Egypt at Camp David, calming a series of Arab-Israeli wars. The US-Soviet arms reduction treaties of the late 80s helped end the Cold War without nuclear Armageddon. And when the Berlin Wall fell, US power was at its peak. It went to war in '91 to throw Saddam Hussein's Iraq out of Kuwait, and the Dayton Accords ended the Bosnian War. Then, on September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda hijacked passenger jets and flew them into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. The world turned. America's war on terror strained its alliances, and successful US-led wars has cemented a reality. We now live in a much more multipolar world. But the State Department here, it faces the same tensions that it always has. When to intervene, how to balance interests with ideals, and the obligations that come with great power. Questions as alive today as they always have been. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera in Washington.
And we are joined now by Dan Grazier, a senior fellow and the director of the National Security Reform Program at the Stimson Center, and Donald Jensen, a former U.S. diplomat in Moscow and Europe. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me. Also want to warn you, as well as our viewers, that we're in the middle of all these military flyovers over the city this afternoon, so there could be a couple of those during our conversation. It's actually been quite fun to watch. Donald, I want to start with you. Some of the founders warned against foreign entanglements. And today we have, under Donald Trump in his second term, an America First policy. Do you see that as echoes of what some of the founding fathers had intended? And how much is that an erosion of the U.S. being this indispensable power?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? And let me maybe have a little different spin than most people would say on this. I find, frankly, a lot of continuity between the founding fathers and Donald Trump. Because America, this internationalism or globalism versus isolationism, to me, they're not black and white. They are different facets of how America views the world. America has always been wary, as you just said, of foreign entanglements, frankly, of other countries. So we seem to alternate, I think, between seeing the old world or Europe or wherever as corrupt and sinful and doing things the wrong way, and trying to change it, or pulling back when we feel like we can no longer change it. So to me, there are different facets of a continuity, a strategic culture, let's say, where America sees the world in a certain way, acts upon it, and has the power to act upon it. The problem is that power may, in a relative sense, may be diminishing. And second, the rest of the world doesn't see the world the way we do. And that causes tension almost from the get-go. We believe in these things. The Declaration of Independence, which we celebrate today, lists things that especially today many parts of the world don't agree with. And that causes tension. We're seeing that, I think, play out right now.
But whether it's been Republican or Democratic administrations, Dan, they have been true, I would say, to a lot of the key alliances that we have around the world, whether it's NATO or any others. And the word that we keep hearing during the second Trump term is transactionality. And that is, I think, how a lot of classic American allies are seeing how to deal with this Trump administration. Do you think that they are reassessing their overall relationship with the United States going forward, or see that transactionality as a blip and unique to the Trump administration?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how these issues unfold, because I think we've gotten to the point in American society and American history where we're starting to see kind of the limits of American influence over like around the world. Like we can't do everything. It's important for us to look after our friends, but it's also important to make sure that we're empowering our friends to be able to take care of their own security needs. Because it's too much for the American people to bear the burden of the global security needs the way that we have since the end of World War II. The United States took on these responsibilities at the end of World War II because we had to, because none of the rest of our friends could. But the world has changed quite a bit in the last 82 years since the end of World War II. And I think it's time, and I think it's long past due that we've kind of reevaluated some of our commitments overseas. And we recognize that our friends actually do have the capacity now to take over some of these burdens.
And we are seeing NATO allies step up with more military expenditure, in no small part because of the urging of the Trump administration. Donald, and you mentioned, we can't do everything. And to that point, Donald, we are now seeing a small coterie of people around Donald Trump kind of handling all of the major portfolios, whether it's Gaza, Ukraine, Iran, the list goes on. We've seen a hollowing out of the State Department, of the National Security Council. A lot of the professionals, the experts are gone. A lot of the processes are gone. What are the practical implications of that?
Well, let me combine that with your previous question to Dan, because they're related. First of all, I think the allies, I can't speak for all of them, but I know many of them, and they are reassessing their relationship with the United States, even as they try to agree with and increase their NATO spending, for example, which I applaud. The problem is they always also ask, what next? Is it going to there going to be a snapback, as the DC cliche is, or is it going to be a change in let's say, the direction of the relationship, a different dynamic? I think the latter is more likely. I think that these changes really speak both to political realities, as Dan just said, but also a different perception of the United States by people who once, until relatively recently, took our support for granted. On the hollowing out issue, yes, I think it's very, very clear that the departure of hundreds or thousands of U.S. public officials has affected the foreign policy apparatus. The formulation of doctrine, of policy, the implementation of policy. And what you see then is a lot of these decisions formally in other agencies now done out of the White House. And you see mistakes made, in my view, a lot. And whether it's about the Iran outcome, you can pick the examples. You can agree or disagree with a specific example. But if allies, for example, about the Iran and the need for European support for our Iran operations, complain that they weren't notified in advance, or this was a surprise, or in the case of the Italians, we own the base, right? We have a say in whether you use it or not. This stuff would not normally happen in let's say, a more experienced security establishment. And that's really, I think, one of the, let's say, downsides we've seen so far as we adjust to the world that Dan just described.
All right, gentlemen, stay with me. We've got a lot more to discuss. But a rivalry between two superpowers defined much of the 20th century. It shaped how the U.S. built its military and used its influence around the world. Gabriel Elizondo looks back on the Cold War.
For nearly 50 years, the United States and the Soviet Union were in perpetual rivalry. It was called, of course, the Cold War. But it was not a war fought in some faraway trenches. Instead, it was a proxy war, a propaganda war, and a race to space. It defined America for decades and led to massive military spending. But then in 1987, standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate and just meters away from the Berlin Wall, part of which is still on display here at UN headquarters in New York, Ronald Reagan uttered that now famous phrase.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
2 years later, the Soviet Union completely collapsed, and the United States was left as the world's sole superpower.
bring Dan Grazier and Donald Jensen back in. Dan, that time, that era, the Cold War, of course, was centered around this U.S.-Soviet rivalry. Now the U.S. sees China as its biggest rival, nearest peer rival, biggest threat on a number of different areas, military, technology, economic. So how is the challenge different now, especially because it's not just China, where it's an increasingly multipolar world?
It is. In a lot of ways, the global situation today is a lot more complex than it was during the Cold War. But unfortunately, I think the national security establishment here in Washington, D.C., tends to try to view the world in the same way as it was in the Cold War, where in the Cold War, it was largely a military rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States. Today, the rivalry with China is a lot more complex. And I think the military aspect is hyped up quite a bit here in Washington, D.C., just because that's where the money is, as it were. But I don't think China poses as much of a military threat as the Soviet Union did. And so I think it's very important for policymakers in Washington to recognize that reality and to take a much more nuanced and balanced approach to dealing with the strategic rivalry that we do face with China.
Donald, when you look at the threat from Russia today, and you know, they have been weakened in a number of different ways, economically, militarily, but still a very formidable power. That said, we don't necessarily have the same nuclear fears that we did back then. But how dangerous is the rivalry now, the enmity between the U.S. and Russia?
I would say, dating myself, it's much more dangerous right now than it was certainly under the Gorbachev era, but even the end of the Brezhnev era as well. Part of the problem, the challenge to the United States, is Russia sees the competition now, not just militarily. It's in terms of lifestyle, it's in terms of chaos creation, it's in terms of aspirations for global hegemony, and the Russian side knowing their weakness to be achieved in a different way. If I could add one more comment about President Reagan, which I'm glad to hear that clip. One of the things that you have to remember about the Cold War is that this was not just about military rivalry. It was about a competition of values, too. And there you played exactly the right speech. Reagan is saying, you know, we're here in a multi-dimensional way, not just military. We're selling you freedom. We're promising you freedom. We will work to help you. And I would add that Pope John Paul II, this is my Jesuit education, also was key. What are you afraid of? He told the Poles. And that was a black and white statement. We will support you. That kind of moral leadership I don't really see much at all these days.
And Donald, as you've been speaking, we heard those planes going overhead. I believe those are what are known as the heavies, transport cargo planes from the U.S. Air Force, sticking to their schedule, which we've been watching closely. Dan, general thoughts as we watch hour upon hour of all of these planes going overhead, this incredible show of military hardware?
Well, it is certainly interesting watching these aircraft fly by. I was just thinking about a couple of the flights that I had in C-17s when I was in the Marine Corps. It's a great opportunity for the American people to see where their tax dollars are going, because these are very expensive. It's a lot of very expensive military hardware that's flying by. It's appropriate that they're flying over Washington because a lot of the policymakers here in D.C. we focus, I think, a little too much sometimes on crafting defense policy and buying weapons and all the expenditures that go along with that. So I think it is a good opportunity to for the American people to see this right now.
Aircraft from every branch of the U.S. military and beyond. And I want to drill down more into military expenditure and budgetary in just a moment. But we have another story coming up. America built its military before it was even a nation. It had a militia. It had a navy before it declared independence 250 years ago. The story of the U.S. is often told as a story of military might, but that has come at a cost both at home as well as overseas. Richard Gaisford reports.
This is a nation shaped by gunpowder.
The first soldiers for the Revolutionary War, a lot of the soldiers even for 1812, were militiamen.
The military made the Maryland city of Aberdeen, where the US Army's proving grounds opened in 1917 to trial new weapons of war, and where the testing and training continues today. Lloyd Schleicher ended his military career here, having served on the front line in Vietnam in the early 1970s. Then there was little public support for returning soldiers at the end of the near 20-year conflict, in which more than 58,000 US military personnel were killed.
We were treated bad, very bad. We were called baby killers, spit at, throw stones and everything at.
Lloyd's the same age as Donald Trump, who didn't serve in Vietnam despite conscription.
God bless Donald Trump.
The decades since have seen more costly conflicts with little perceived gain. American forces led a NATO response to root out Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers in 2001.
American and coalition forces.
2 years later, the Americans spearheaded an invasion of Iraq to remove a perceived threat from Saddam Hussein.
We made a lot of mistakes back then. We did a lot of stupid things back then. You performed ably, but your political leadership did not.
In recent months, many felt history was repeating itself as the US went to war with Iran. Once again, regime change was an early military goal, one that's yet to be fully realized. It's a long way from the glories of World War II, when American military might was a defining factor in a victory against Nazi and Japanese oppression. The US continues to project power on land, air and sea. America has the world's largest warship, which recently returned to its base in Virginia after an 11-month deployment. The Founding Fathers first built a navy in Philadelphia before declaring independence to go into battle against Britain. From small beginnings, the Americans have created the most powerful naval force in the world. What you see behind me here in Philadelphia is what they're not using. Ships that are either ready to be decommissioned or sitting here just in case they need to be called back into action. And increased defence spending means a new life for Philadelphia's historic shipbuilding yard. It's now owned by a Korean company, which will quadruple the workforce to construct a new nuclear-powered submarine in the city for the US government. Last year, the US Army celebrated its 250th anniversary. America's military continuing to march into the future, emboldened by new funding and challenged by the demands of its Commander-in-Chief. Richard Gaisford, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Since its founding, America's adversaries have traditionally been foreign nations. But 25 years ago, that all changed when Al-Qaeda targeted New York's Twin Towers and the Pentagon here in Washington, killing thousands of civilians. That devastating attack changed the way that the U.S. views itself and its place in the world and who its enemies are. Kristen Salumi is in New York, reflecting on those 9/11 attacks.
This reflecting pool outlines where one of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center once stood. It's now a memorial to the nearly 3,000 people killed on September 11, 2001, whose names are inscribed here. The 9/11 attacks reoriented U.S. foreign policy from a Cold War mentality focused on the Soviet Union to a new kind of enemy, non-state actors. The administration of George W. Bush declared a global war on terror and not only invaded Afghanistan, but also invaded Iraq. The collapse of the Twin Towers reverberated across the globe, reshaping international security and relations in the 21st century.
We have the emergency.
Yes, 2 World Trade Center. We have injured people in the lobby of the building.
Let's go, guys. Let's go. Move. Right here, right here. Just looking for them now. We got to go by. Ramis and O'Brien.
We were trying to dig him out. He was alive. And then it collapsed again on us.
What? I don't have any.
America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City.
I'm back now with Dan Grazier and Donald Jensen. Donald, after the 9/11 attacks, NATO sprung into action. It was the first time that the Transatlantic Alliance had invoked Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. The U.S. went to war in Afghanistan, joined by its NATO allies. I don't think there has been a time in NATO's history when that relationship is more strained. We were just talking a moment ago about how the U.S. is viewing those NATO allies. How are those NATO allies viewing us?
I would say, in large part, I don't speak for all, some great mistrust, some uncertainty, and a lot of questions about if the U.S. continues to, let's say, pull away from the alliance a little bit, we don't know how much, how will they fill the security gap? And these are daily questions. Berlin and Brussels, when they deal with the Russian threat, when they deal with the China threat, they deal with immigration, how will the U.S. respond? And that trust, which was also always automatic, perhaps unjustifiably so, is now not there anymore. So they are now saying, well, what happens in 2028? They ask me that, I don't know. But the snapback question I come back to, and that's a major difference from after 2001, when, as you say, they came automatically, frankly, even Putin did, to our at least verbal assistance, and in many cases, material assistance. That is now gone, and my personal view is we have to rebuild a lot of the trust in whatever form it might take, change certainly. But we also have to think about how we, all of us, in Europe and our allies elsewhere, with the United States, are going to tackle these challenges, which you so correctly described.
As the State Department, NSC, and other parts of the number of government agencies are losing their budgets, Dan, we are seeing a ballooning Pentagon budget. I think you've argued that more spending doesn't necessarily buy more security. So what are all these extra billions buying?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of these extra billions are frankly going to be squandered in a lot of the normal pathologies that exist within the national security establishment.
These are more Air Force aircraft going ahead. These are from AFSOC, so the Air Force Special Operations Command. I can't see them yet, but I can hear some rotors. So it's either a helicopter, an Osprey, or something like that. But Dan, pick up where you left off.
Sure. Yeah, we're seeing an Osprey.
I mean, case in point, all the money we're spending on that hardware.
AC-130 and two AC-130.
Oh yeah, they're
Ospreys. Yeah, defense spending it's a really interesting subject. We've seen huge increases in defense expenditures over the last 25 years, basically since September 11th. While at the same time, we've seen a shrinking of the U.S. military. So part of that is military equipment today is vastly more complex and therefore more expensive than military equipment from years ago. Unfortunately, that complex military equipment a lot of times doesn't work very well. A good example of that, and we should see a couple of them flying over here before too long, is the F-35. The Government Accountability Office just came out with a report that says that the F-35 program has a fleet-wide full mission capable rate of 25%, which is abysmal. That's a failed program. And so that's where a lot of our money is going. It's buying a lot of very complex, but yet very disappointing military hardware. The F-35 is a good example of that. The Gerald R. Ford, which was mentioned in the package before, is another good example of that. It's a very, very expensive ship, and they had a lot of trouble with it during that deployment.
If I could add just to Dan's comment, please. I think the example of Ukraine is the most shocking underlining of what Dan just said, which I agree with. A country that was widely seen to be losing a year ago, not having the cards is now the cliche, has now created thousands of drones, not literally, but sometimes literally in their garages, which has rocked back the second most powerful army in the world in Russia. And they're on their back foot. Who knows how the war will turn out? But the Ukrainians are doing this with innovation, decentralization, freedom from its very talented younger people who are very high-tech knowledgeable. They're giving them the opportunity to create at a reasonable cost, and look what we see. We see the entire Red Army, if I can call it that, stuck in its tracks. And that is a lesson for the kinds of issues that Dan works on. It's a lesson for all of us about the value of morale, of flexibility, creativity, and for them so far, it's been working pretty well.
As the battle for the trophy intensifies.
It's Japan who goes out, Brazil through to the last 16. They're going to be celebrating limiting to the night.
From the host nations and around the world, Al Jazeera brings you the stories as they happen. Follow the World Cup on Al Jazeera.
A poisonous secret in France's colonial past. The widespread illegal use of chemical weapons during the Algerian War of Independence.
En fait, je vais vous dire, c'était la mode empirique, artisanale. On en cramait un maximum pour être sûr de l'effet.
Algeria, Toxic Colonization. Episode 2, Scarred Legacy on Al Jazeera.
There are no airports nearby, and all the roads leading to this part of the country are impassable right now. The reason why all of this is so valuable for the drug traffickers is that it has a direct access to the river and from here to the port. From here they take the drugs to the ships. Just a cigarette and a few matches. You can set fire to the bush and the twigs that are everywhere here. A lot of people have been wearing masks on their faces saying, "We are all Evo Morales. We are all you."
Hello everybody, I'm Rashad Salamat. This is the NewsHour live from Doha, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Military maneuvers and star-spangled celebrations. Americans brave extreme heat to celebrate 250 years since independence.
I'm Heidi Jo Castro in Washington, D.C., where a crowd of thousands is trying to get in place to watch Donald Trump's speech marking the nation's 250th anniversary and marvel at what's billed to be the largest fireworks display in the world.
Also had Tuareg-led rebels launch a coordinated attack on several towns across Mali. A base used by Russian troops also comes under fire. Record-breaking heat sparking major wildfires across Western Europe. And Morocco. The United States is marking 250 years